Welcome to Pepperl+Fuchs Plugged In, where automation professionals can stay in touch with the latest enhancements in sensing, data communication, and control.
Welcome to Pepperl+Fuchs Plugged In. Good afternoon, good day, and today I have Sean Bauman with me. Hello, Sean.
Hi, all good. Thanks for having me today. How are you doing?
Doing just fine. Sean, we're going to discuss a unique product today. Tell us a bit what you brought, and then we go into the details.
We are. Today, I brought with me the USi-industry, which is expanding onto our previous USi-safety portfolio, and also expanding the already very wide and vast portfolio of ultrasonic sensors at Pepperl+Fuchs.
Yeah, we've had ultrasonics for, I have no idea, 30, 40 years or so, very long time. And in fact, we're the market leader in that technology. But this is really great because USi-safety was unique, but as the name implies, it was a safety solution, and therefore there are certain rules that users have to abide by, and now we're kind of removing those rules, making it non-safe, but still keeping a lot of functionality.
Yeah, correct. That, kind of as it implies, the USi-safety did bring uniqueness into ultrasonic, as it is the only, and still is the only, safety solution when it comes to an ultrasonic technology. USi-industry, we are kind of taking the reins off a little bit. Do not have the same restrictions as you would expect in a safety environment.
What type of restrictions are you talking about?
So by this, with safety, one example I can provide is with the USi-safety, with any change that was made, the user would be required to essentially release those current conditions for that application for use. So if any edit was made to the environment or any edit was made to the target, you would need to essentially redo that process and re-release the product.
Yeah, there is a document. In fact, there's a document that's getting created. It's electronic, and someone with the proper authority has to sign off on that document. Say, yes, this is what needs to be done. This is correct.
Correct. And the document is very handy and comes into play whenever there are audits or someone needs to check a certain line where the sensor is involved. The documentation is automatically printed up, so that extra step is not needed from the consumer side.
And that brings me to the question, why would anybody want a USi-industry in the first place? What is so great about USi technology that a USi-industry makes sense?
So there are a couple reasons. One of the main attention grabbers for USi-safety, and I would just from here on out discuss it as USi-industry, is the uniqueness of the elliptical sound beam that the transducers emit. Now, if you think of a standard ultrasonic sensor, if you can take a piece of paper and kind of roll it up into a cone, that would be a standard ultrasonic. Now, if you would take that same piece of paper and almost flatten it down, not completely, but to make it, if you're looking at it from a side perspective, you see more or less an elliptical shape, that would be the sound coverage of the USi.
And why is that good? In what situations is that good?
So it's really advantageous in applications where you are very close or you need a different sort of coverage. I'll say one application, if you're mounting near the ground, for example, on an AGV, if you're using a standard ultrasonic and you have a regular cone, that sound field has the chance to reflect off of the ground if there's a crack or if there's imperfections within the flooring. With the USi and with the unique transducers in the elliptical sound field, you're able to mount it such that you don't lose any sort of coverage in what you're detecting, but at the same time, you can also mount it such that physically the sound will never actually hit the ground. So if there are cracks, if there are imperfections, inconsistencies in the ground that you don't want to detect in the first place, then you're able to ignore those such things with the USi transducers.
And then I imagine, and we need to talk about range in a second here anyway, I imagine that for considering certain lateral coverage, you don't need a real big transducer to get lateral coverage at good distance.
Correct. And that kind of gets into another point. With the USi transducers, or the USi-industry transducers, picture them as being about the size of a matchbox, or your thumb. I have relatively big thumbs, but you've got a more or less matchbox size sensor versus a 30 millimeter transducer that's could be up to 55 or even longer millimeters of barrel length that you have to account for mounting. With the USi transducers, you're able to fit them in some of those tight application spaces, tight mounting spaces to kind of get similar range or similar performance.
And then the electronics goes into a more or less a better protected area. How long is that separation between the transducer and the electronics? What's the length of that cable you're talking about?
So the maximum distance between the USi-industry transducers to the evaluation unit is 3 meters. From the evaluation unit to the controls, you can have any sort of length, but from the evaluating box to the transducer, we are restricted to 3 meters.
So if I need more cable, can I just cut it and make it longer? Or if I want shorter cable, can I cut it and take a piece out?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. There are no alterations should be made between the transducers and the evaluation.
Why is that?
They come as one system. They have been approved and tested together with like components. Any additions would then void and invalidate some of those tests.
And so what you're saying is really that the cable is not just a passive cable, it's part of the circuitry.
Correct. It's a very special cable, coax shielded, so it's been created specifically for the USi-industry and USi-safety.
All right. So I meant to ask you, what is the range of this little transducer?
Oh yeah, sure. So the range for the USi-industry and USi-safety for that matter, it can go up to 2.5 meters.
That is very, very long range for such a tiny little thing. And by the way, I should mention, you're talking about tiny matchboxes because a matchbox, in my opinion, is considerably larger than this transducer. It is really small. It's very, very nice as a package.
Yeah, sure.
Talk to me about the applications. Where do you see this product being used?
So the first applications to kind of have in the back of your mind are applications where maybe the customer had evaluated the USi-safety and didn't need the safety levels, but somehow appreciated the coverage that it offered. This would be almost an immediate alternative to some of those applications. Other applications would be just standard applications where you need a differential in the sound coverage of the option of the ultrasonic, hopefully. Again, we're getting a 3D elliptical sound field versus just a standard cone, or if we're talking about other.
So Sean, I need to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
Talk about, this is news to me. What is differential? I forgot, what did you call it? Differential field or differential evaluation?
Yeah, there are different ways to evaluate objects within the field. With the USi-industry, it brings with it both a positive detection and also negative detection.
Again, two new words.
Yeah, and I'll elaborate on those two. So for the case of a positive detection, it is essentially an empty field with no objects being expected in the field. If you introduce any sort of object, that's when you get your output.
That's what we're used to. That's what a sensor typically does, right? It detects an item.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the everyday use. We also have the alternative or the negative where you teach a certain object or a certain reflective behavior of the environment to the sensor, and if that is ever changed or removed, you get almost a negative detection where you also get an output on where that object was supposed to be, but no longer is.
Okay, all right, now I get that. So we started talking about applications. We kind of got sidetracked here. Let's get back to applications because this seems like a strong function for certain applications.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the applications will be within our AGV market. So we will have some use cases for collision avoidance where it's not the primary source for the collision avoidance function. It is essentially adding an extra step or an extra aid to other systems. And I kind of want to avoid getting into a safety discussion, but there are different layers to being able to apply safety.
And by the way, I have seen these. Some of our customers put these little transducers in the tip of a forklift fork.
Mhm.
Why is that done?
So the main reason they can do that is one, due to the size, the very small size of the transducers. It enables very minimal change on their part as far as mounting it is concerned, and they can hide it and tuck it away from the very front of the forks to essentially prevent any sort of damages from bumping or running into something, or even driving through a pallet. There's some contact from the pallet to the fork tips. So the size of this is the first and foremost advantage for some of those applications.
Usually when we talk about applications for sound-based detection, the question comes up is, what about interference?
Mm-hmm.
What about interference from other sensors, from the same kind of sensor mounted nearby, or another source? Could be let's say a grinder, something that creates some nasty howling or screeching noise. So how well does the USi-safety do there?
So I'll take a quick step back and just mention that for some time now, ultrasonic has been a relatively well-known technology for over 30 years. In the beginning stages, there were influences that could false trip a sensor, like compressed air, power equipment, things of that nature. So from 30 years ago to now, just generally speaking across the market, ultrasonic sensors are very strong in holding up against those sorts of conditions. The USi-industry in particular introduces something new with how it handles other similar products. So if we can go to a standard ultrasonic from Pepperl+Fuchs or from anyone else, I would be very close to saying almost all ultrasonic sensors, if used nearby other ultrasonic sensors of the same family, those usually must be synchronized in some way. The most common way is done through physical connection of a certain synchronization wire. The USi-industry is able to do the same thing without any sort of physical connection to the next USi-industry system.
Or other source.
Or other source, correct. With the USi-industry, this is done via a unique algorithm within the evaluation unit that is processing the data and essentially modulating the frequencies so that at any one given point in time, the system has a unique frequency that it's emitting the sound and evaluating that sound at the same frequency. So it is very highly unlikely that another system or 10 other systems or 50 other systems would be evaluating at the same point in time, the same exact frequency. I don't want to say never, but there is always the possibility from chance that if you've got 100 units all looking at each other in a room.
But how likely is that really? Now you're kind of creating a scenario that is unlikely on top of unlikely.
I've got to be honest.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, it's appreciated.
If it would happen, it would only be at 1 second in time that the frequencies would align, and the very next second they would be off to a different modulation of the frequency.
That's clear. That's clear. Good. Did we miss anything? Before I try to summarize all the great details you provided us today.
I think through some of the discussions, maybe I alluded to it, but to be specific, I did want to say kind of what the full package would look like with a USi-industry
please do.
Option. So a full system would have one evaluation unit, and you could have one transducer, you could have two transducers. I want to be clear that you do not need to use two transducers. It's all dependent on what kind of coverage is needed for the application. With the USi-safety, we also have the option of an external temperature sensor. USi-industry now brings this temperature sensor within the evaluation unit. So there is temperature compensation on board locally to the evaluation unit for different applications.
All right. My turn?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Before I go, remember, you need to come up with a 5-word statement that you want our listeners to take away from our conversation. And while you think about it, I'll try to summarize what you told us today. So we discussed today USi-safety, which is let me call it for now, the non-safe variant of the USi-safety system we had for a while. The reason we came to the market with this solution is that our customers realize the benefits of the unique design of the transducer, being very, very small, being able to do things like the negative detection, i.e. the absence of something in the field that was there or should be there before, and to package that into a smaller unit without the need to go through the safety required release processes. So simplicity, cost reduction, of course, is an issue, but still having that great functionality. You mentioned that the cable between the transducer and electronic evaluation unit is part of the active circuit. So do not cut, lengthen, shorten. It's just what it is. The range is very, very good for a small little unit like that. You mentioned 2.5 meters, so that gets us into the range of usually a 30 millimeter cylindrical solution with much larger package sizes. And when it comes to applications, you mentioned that the main application, or one of the major applications, deals with situations where you need a wide in one direction and narrow in the other direction field. So AGVs, forks on AGVs come to mind, these kinds of things. And the reason that is beneficial is it allows us to mount these across the floor without being impacted by imperfections in the floor. The unique sound beam just makes that possible. And maybe lastly, I want to mention that in order to use this as a system, you need an evaluation unit and then one or two transducers. It'll run with one, it'll run with two, whatever the specifics of the application call for. And while there is internal temperature compensation in the evaluation electronics, we also offer external temperature compensation for, I imagine, quicker responses if this thing goes in and out of a cold storage place very frequently. What did I miss?
One thing that I think I missed was actually within the programmability of the device. USi-industry also is bringing with it the ability to parameterize and adjust any sort of parameter or setting through packtware. So it's more or less aligning with many of the other products within the portfolio and most of the products within the ultrasonic portfolio, to be specific.
Very good. So your turn, 5 words.
So 5 words to describe the USi-industry. I would say unique, economical, flexible ultrasonic sensor.
Unique, economical, and flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And of course, ultrasonic. Well, Sean, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for talking about USi-industry as a line extension to USi-safety. And for everybody out there, thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, reach out to us. And as you know, there will be more coming out of the Pepperl+Fuchs plugged-in series. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and thanks, Sean.
Thanks, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Pepperl+Fuchs Plugged In. Please subscribe to our channel and never miss hearing about the latest innovations in factory automation.